Good afternoon, I'm the 100 Proof Newshound, and we're here for another episode of the 100 Years and More Show. Today it's a special biographical episode. We're going to be looking at the most interesting man in America, not that fellow that did those beer commercials. This is a gentleman who I believe had probably the most interesting life of anybody, any American who's yet lived. I would actually refer to him as the American Churchill. Why? Well, Churchill had a life, man. Churchill had a life where, he was a cavalry officer, a war correspondent, a prisoner of war. He escaped the prisoner of war camp and rode a couple hundred miles on a train to get out of South Africa. He was the first lord of the Admiralty in World War I, meaning he ran the Navy. He was responsible for the mess in Gallipoli. He served in the front lines in France. He was a backbench a politician in the 1920s and 30s, railing against the threat that Adolf Hitler deemed to the United Kingdom. He was called upon to save his country in World War II, and even after World War II, he served a couple terms as prime minister and became a pretty good painter whose paintings now trade for over $100,000 a piece. So that's an interesting life. But our man is Lew Wallace, had a life that I would say is just about that interesting. Lew Wallace was a man of the American West. He was born in Indiana in 1827. If there's a theme in this series of episodes, it's that if you want something done in the 19th century, you got to go to the American West. And by West, I mean everything from Pittsburgh to St. Louis. So Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, Missouri. That's where the action is. That's where modern innovations occur. That's where you get the Rockefellers and the Fords and the Goodyear and the Carnegies. Basically, if there's an Edison, if there's action and you want stuff done, it's done in the West. It's financed by the East. In New York, it remains a city of accountants, lawyers, and stockbrokers. But not a lot gets produced there that is out in the West. And Lew Wallace is a product of that. In fact, Lew Wallace's father, who was a lawyer, goes on and becomes governor of Indiana and also serves as a congressman for the state of Indiana. So he had a productive, normal kind of productive life, and on his own was quite a substantial man. But Lew Wallace goes many steps beyond his father, and let's dive into it right now. His formal education, he stays in school till he's 16 when his father decides that he's had enough formal education. I think he decided he's had enough sponging off him, and makes him go out and get a job. And his first job is the Marion County Clerk's office, basically a real estate registration office. It's a nice, safe job for a fellow his age, but it doesn't give him enough action. To get the action, he goes off and joins the Marion Rifles, which is the local militia unit. He works his way up through the ranks and becomes a first lieutenant, and he just happens to be there right in 1947 as that unit is called up to go off and fight in the Mexican-American War. So off he goes to Mexico in 1847. He doesn't see any action, but he's around action. Stuff's happening all around him, and he writes home to the Indiana State Sentinel on April 10th, 1847. Here's what he saw. A train of 260 wagons was attacked just beyond Coralvo and captured by General Urea. The inhuman devil heaped the wagons into a vast pyramid, threw onto them the bodies of the teamsters who he had previously murdered, and setting fire to them, blotted his country with infamy, while he himself burdened his own pockets with the lion's share of $150,000, which was at that time being conveyed to Monterey. So obviously that was the payroll or bribe money that was going to be used to facilitate the Mexican War. He concludes with a little salutation here that gives you an insight into the mind of the Americans of mid-19th century. Give us your best wishes, though, and we will win names for ourselves and state, which will set us for valor and chivalry alongside Kentucky and Virginia. Notice the identification with state. State actually comes before nation in many cases, and that goes a long way to explaining why the Civil War was fought when and it as vigorously as it was. States meant a lot more back then than they mean to a modern person today. He comes back home after the war. He goes back and joins his father in his law firm and is reading law. And at the same time, him and a buddy, Bill Greer, open a newspaper called the Free Soil Banner in Indianapolis. The Free Soil movement needs a little explanation. That's the precursor to the Republican Party. It is an abolitionist, anti-slavery movement. About as far from freedom of slaves as you can get, making it extremely popular and unpopular depending on the point of view at the time. So he's a publisher there. He's a clerk. He's a soldier. He's been a lawyer. He maintains those positions while also going off and running for public office. He first is elected prosecuting attorney in Indiana's first congressional district, which he holds until 1853. Then he moves to Crawfordsville, Indiana, where he's elected to the Indiana State Senate and serves until 1856. While in Crawfordsville, remember, he was part of that other militia unit, he organizes the Crawfordsville Guard Independent Militia, which became known as the Montgomery Guards during 1859-1860. He senses, he's reading the winds, he senses the war, that the country may be going to war, and he wants to get in there early and get a prime spot. And he does. Because what happens is when the war comes about in 1861, the military is expanded many-fold, 50 times fold. I'm picking a number, but it's a number like that. You need officers, men you can get, where you can recruit men off the street, you can pay them, bribe them, and draft them. You can get bodies and uniforms. But they have to be led. And in order to be led, you need somebody who has some military experience. So anybody who had pre-war military experience is going to instantly jump up the ranks in the Union and Confederate armies. So that's why you get a fellow. Well, if you were a captain in the old army and the war comes around, you immediately become a major general. That's Grant and Sherman, those kind of guys. But even if you were a lieutenant in a militia, you've got enough military experience that they need you, and you'll become a colonel. And that's what he did. He became a colonel in the Indiana Volunteer Infantry, the 11th Division, the 11th Indiana Volunteer Infantry Regiment. That's where he begins his career. And nobody knew what was going to happen in the Civil War. Nobody knew the extent of the battles and the casualties. Everyone underestimated where this thing was going. And Lew Wallace, in a letter he sends on June 20th, 1861, right at the beginning of hostilities, back to the Weekly Republican in Plymouth, Indiana, outlines just how naive everybody was. There was a little skirmish, and somebody had insinuated that Lew Wallace's regiment had retreated rather than advanced, and he won't stand for it. So here's what he writes. After the fight at Romney, the rebels did not rally and return. They ran 16 miles toward Winchester before they stopped. So far from my retreating, I brought into camp at Cumberland their tents, valuable arms, uniforms, medical stores without leaving anything behind. The rout was total. There were 7 funerals in town. We killed a captain, an ex-member of the legislature, and took one of their majors prisoner. I send you this to stop the infamous secession slanders about my retreat, started by some cowardly scoundrel in Alexandria. He's making a deal out of something with 7 casualties. 7 people were killed. That is such a triviality. That would happen by accident with just a party of skirmishers running into each other in the woods. This is by no way is this a battle, but they don't know that yet. They don't know the full extent of what's going to happen. And what does happen, he's in line for seeing some real action here. He gets assigned, as most of the Western units did to the army under the leadership of General Ulysses S. Grant, and Grant goes down Kentucky into Tennessee, and the battles of Forts Henry and Donelson are fought in February 4th and 5th, 1862. These are really good Union victories, and Grant's really showing his ability as a commander. They're attacking fortified rebel positions in 2 forts, and within a matter of a couple of days each, he has those forts surrendering to them. They're the first real victories of the Union Army in the Civil War. You'll notice, because of the quality of leadership, the Western theater is basically an almost unending series of Union victories, while in the East, it's almost an unending series of Confederate victories. But here we are. Lew Wallace, operating as a brigadier general, is involved in the thick of the fighting and distinguishes himself quite well. Well, here's it's noted in the Buffalo Commercial of February 18th, 1862. At the suggestions from McClernand, General Wallace sent up 4 regiments to support his division, who were nearly out of ammunition. From the commencement until 10 o'clock, the fighting was terrific. And they note that the 3 brigades composing McClernand's division bore the brunt of the battle, and one of those 3 brigades was Lew Wallace's. And because of his high performance at the Battle of Fort Donaldson, he is made a major general, and a major general allows him to command a full division, 7,000 men now. Okay, so he's gone from a regiment which would be under 1,000 to a full division, which is 6,000 or 7,000. And so he's working his way down with General Grant down the Tennessee River to a little place called Shiloh, where on April 6, 1862, Union forces are surprised by the advancing Confederates. The Union had thought that they were on the attack, and so they hadn't prepared any defensive fortifications, and basically they're caught with their pants down. General Sherman, his line is pushed back over a mile initially. He rallies his troops. They're able to form a defensive line, and for the rest of the day, the Union troops, the 35,000 or so Union troops that are there at Shiloh, are fighting a slow withdrawal all the way back to where their backs are almost up to the Tennessee River. Now, where was Lew Wallace? Lew Wallace was at a place, his 6,000 or 7,000 men were at a place called Crump's Landing, which is 6 or 7 miles upstream on the Tennessee, away from where Grant's troops were located. As the battle commences in that morning, Grant sends an order up to Wallace to say, well, basically, join us as quickly as possible. Now, he's 6 or 7 miles away, but he doesn't know exactly where. He's got to figure out not just where the troops are now, but where are the troops going to be in 4 or 5 hours when he can get there. See, there are 2 roads. One goes down near the Tennessee River, and one shoots across north of that. The more direct route is the one north of that, and he decides to take that. He takes his men and he leads them there, but by the time he gets, in the 2 hours it takes him to get down that road, by the time he reaches the battlefield, the Confederates have advanced so much that their lines are now a mile or so to his left. He comes out, he would be coming out behind the Confederate lines. There's some opportunity there, and we're going to discuss it in a minute, but he chooses not to come out behind the Confederate lines where he would be exposed. What he chooses to do, though, is to come around, and he's got to get back to that other road. And how does he choose to do it? Think of his troops are lined out for more than a mile. The reason I'm taking all this time is that this is actually one of the important seminal moments in Lew Wallace's life. You got to look at it like a snake. It's a mile-long snake. Lew Wallace is at the head, and they're about to come out on the battlefield. He's got 2 choices here. He can turn every man around instantly and then lead them back down the road that they came up, tail first. Or he can do the counter-march, more military thing, where they turn like a snake. The snake would make a quick turn, then go all the way back down. You'd probably save 2 hours by just turning around and going. And he didn't do that. He did the snake thing where he brought his men all the way around till they were back to the original junction at Crump's Landing, and then took the other road all the way up, and he missed the battle. Well, he didn't get there on the first day of the battle. He got there just before 7 o'clock as things were winding down. Grant was livid. Grant couldn't believe it. He'd been sending orders to him all day, or ordering him to advance immediately with all haste to the battlefield, and he missed the full day's battle. The Union came very close to losing. They were reinforced the next day by Lew Wallace's division, but also by another 30,000 men, 30,000 men coming up to Tennessee. And with the new reinforcements, they were able to push the Confederates off the field the next day. The casualties were horrendous, 25,000 casualties per side. There'd been nothing like this since the Napoleonic Wars, and certainly nothing like this on the American continent. This battle had 10 times the casualties of any battle in the American Revolution. But there were another 25 or 30 battles like this to go in the Civil War before it was decided. But for the most part, because of Lew Wallace's actions in counter-marching and arriving so late in the day, it took 25 years for Grant to forgive him if he ever did, and it ruined Lew Wallace's military career to a great extent. He was forced to sit out the next year and a half before he finally got another command. And that next command is actually kind of interesting. It's in the city of Cincinnati. I bet you can know an awful lot about the Civil War and never have thought that there was any battles around Cincinnati, but there were. The Confederates had decided to test the strength of the Union defenses around Cincinnati, and sent about 8,000 men up there to demonstrate what they refer to as a demonstration. There was nobody else around, so Lew Wallace was given command of the men in that area. And to that end, he built a pontoon bridge. He reinforced over on the Covington, Kentucky side. When the Confederates finally did get there, there were enough regular Ohio forces there to repel them, and the local newspapers began referring to Lew Wallace as the savior of Cincinnati. I'm not sure that's a sobriquet that he would have much appreciated, but it's better than nothing. And it really did, though, get his toe back in the door, because he becomes instrumental in potentially saving the Union. Remember, the Confederacy didn't have to defeat the Union Army in the field to win the Civil War. The Confederate Army the Confederates only had to make the North, the Union, the United States, not want to fight anymore. And that could be for a variety of things. It could be because the costs were too high, both in money and in blood. It could be that they just didn't think they could win. There's a variety of ways of beating the North. In order for the North to win, they've actually got to defeat the Confederates in the field. But in late 1944, Grant's got Richmond and Petersburg surrounded, and Lee's armies are basically tied down there. In order to relieve pressure, in order to try to get some of the Union Army away from Petersburg and Richmond, Lee orders Jubal Early to go down the Shenandoah Valley, break out, and make a run towards Washington with 15 to 20,000 men. And amazingly enough, when he makes this breakout past Harper's Ferry, there really isn't anybody there. The only group of people that are there are Lew Wallace and his regiment, basically, his division of about 5,000 men. He's up against 15 to 20,000 men, and he throws himself into the battle at Fredericksburg. Just outside of Fredericksburg, Monocacy River, at the Monocacy River. It's only about 25 miles from Washington, D.C. And if he's not there, if Lew Wallace was not there, Jubal Early would have had a straight run into Washington. Now, there's fortifications there. There were men there, but were there enough? And the effect of Jubal Early, of 15 or 20,000 rebels occupying Washington, D.C., or at least even threatening it seriously, could have gone a long way to discouraging the North. Not that it was automatically going to end the war, but it would not have looked good and would have been a major political and military problem for Lincoln. But fortunately, he had Lew Wallace there. Lew Wallace attacked, and he held on. Now, this is how serious the skirmishes were, or the battles were. Here's the Brooklyn Eagle, July 11th, 1864. First, the rebel invasion. Further and more detailed accounts from Baltimore. Preparations to defend the city. The rebels believed to be moving towards Washington. Preparations made to remove the government archives. Rebels attempting to cut the railroad connecting the North with Washington. Then, the savior, the Battle of Monocacy. They're summarized in the paper. Our losses today are estimated at 1,000 men, mostly captured after we were flanked. The rebels in killed and wounded is believed to be as large as our loss. It is rumored, and I believe, that General Tyler is captured, but how it happened is not known. The general wasn't captured, but it was a big deal, and it restored, by the end of the war, if not in Grant's eyes, it restored the position of Lew Wallace in the eyes of the U.S. military, and that's important for the next episode, the next part of his career, because we think of the judgment at Nuremberg after World War II. There were war crime trials. Well, there were war crime trials after the Civil War as well. One of them was the trial of the murderers of Abraham Lincoln, and that was really like the O.J. trial. That was a big deal. It was covered by all the papers. The eight assassins were tried by a military tribunal, not by a regular court. And because he was back in favor, Lew Wallace was one of the 8 judges that was set to hear the case. Here we are, the Cleveland Leader, May 16th, 1855. The assassination conspiracy, the room in which the prisoners are tried, graphic descriptions of their personal appearances. They covered it in minutia, right down to what kind of facial hair each of the accused had and who was sitting where. They note that on the right of the north side of the table sits General Lew Wallace. On the opposite side, and to the left of the president, is Brevet Major General August V. Coates. So This really was like the OJ trial. And of course, after a couple weeks of trial, they were all convicted and everyone hung. And he went on, Lew Wallace went on in a second trial. Now, this is truly a war crimes trial. It's the trial of Captain Wirtz, W-I-R-Z, who was the warden, such as it was, of Andersonville Prison. Now, we all know Andersonville Prison was that inhuman prisoner of war camp where hundreds of Union soldiers died through malnutrition, and they tried Wirtz as a war criminal. And Lew Wallace sat as the chief judge on the tribunal. He was in fact Judge Ito to O.J. Simpson's Wirtz, and his name once again became a household name. His name once again became a household name throughout America. So let's have a look. Let's do a recap here. We've got a gentleman here in Lew Wallace who now by the age of, he's not quite 40 yet, he's 38 years old. And here's what he's been a clerk, he's a lawyer, he's a lieutenant in the Mexican War, he's a publisher, he's a state senator, he's a Civil War general, and he's a judge. He's done all that. But he's not even close to being done. Because after he resigns from the American military, he goes down and consults with the Mexican military. They promise him $100,000 in order to reconstitute, revise, and modernize the Mexican military. They're afraid of European. They're afraid of the European powers making assaults upon their independence, and they feel that they need a better military, so they're going to use Lew Wallace. Now, Wallace goes down there, and it's noted he's going down here in the Evening Post of Cleveland, Ohio, August 1, 1866. It says, Major General Lew Wallace of Indiana and another military man were passengers on the steamer which left New York the other day with a cargo of arms for the liberals in Mexico. So he's down there. He was supposed to get that $100,000. They reneged on the deal. He never got any money. And so he had to get back to the States. But because he's back in the good graces of the military, and because Grant's now the president, he asks for a patronage position, and he gets one. He gets a great thing, a great job. He's named governor of the New Mexico Territory, and that's in 1877. And he's named governor of the New Mexico Territory. And when is this in the New Mexico Territory? Well, it's right during the Lincoln County War. Now, he arrives in Santa Fe in September of 1878, and the Lincoln County War is raging. And the number one name that anyone remembers from the Lincoln County War is, of course, William Bonney, or Billy the Kid. Now, Billy the Kid has committed a bunch of heinous crimes, and he's wanted on a variety of charges. But Lew Wallace arranges a meeting where he meets with Billy the Kid, and he offers him amnesty if he will turn state's evidence and give testimony against a couple other of the ringleaders of the Lincoln County War. Those trials occur. He gives his evidence, but the district attorney reneges on the deal, and Billy the Kid flees, commits more heinous acts, and eventually is killed by Pat Garrett, Sheriff Pat Garrett, who by chance again is a friend of Lew Wallace. Now here's what Pat Garrett had to say. This is in the Cincinnati Enquirer, July 16th, 1902. He's reminiscing back. Here we go. Patrick Garrett, the New Mexico sheriff who hunted down and killed the notorious outlaw Billy the Kid, is visiting New York for the first time in his life. He then gives his version of what happened. He says, on the night of July 12th, I got to Peter Maxwell's ranch. I left my two men outside and went in to see Maxwell, whom I knew well. Peter was lying in bed in a corner. I put my Winchester against the wall and sat down on the bed to talk with him. I told him I had heard that Billy had been around there. He said he hadn't seen him. I knew by his manner that he wasn't telling the truth, and while we were sitting there, Billy walked in. He'd gone across the road, I learned afterward, to order a Mexican there to get up and make him some coffee. When he came back to the ranch house, he saw my two men and accosted them in Spanish. They made no answer, and he darted into the house and upstairs in his stocking feet. My face was in shadow when he appeared in the doorway, and he darted over to me with his knife in one hand and his gun in the other. He had his gun within a foot of me when he laid his hands on my knees and demanded, "Who are you?" He sprang back instantly when he recognized me and fired. But I had fired first, and the ball went through his heart. I fired a second time, but the bullet went over him. He had fallen. Then he notes, 100 different stories have been told about how I killed Billy, but this is the true one. I've got a tintype of Billy, that's the early photograph, at home, the only one in existence. And I think we've all seen that. That's the one where Billy the Kid is standing there with a rifle on butt end on the ground. He's leaning against the rifle. And as I was on the way to the train, I left it with the photographers to be enlarged for General Lew Wallace, who wants to write an article about him. So Pat Garrett made a copy of the tintype for Lew Wallace. I don't know whether that's still in existence because I thought there was only the one original. He summarizes Billy the Kid thusly, though. There were many good traits about Billy. He came from New York State somewhere. He was only 22 years old when he died, but he'd been up to all kinds of devilry for 6 or 7 years. He wasn't what you'd call a killer. He never made a gunplay he didn't mean, and he never shot up a town or committed any other such foolishness. I've met worse than Billy. Well, if you've met worse than Billy the Kid, you probably have also led a full life. Now, his governorship is up, and he applies for gets a different position. This one is a bit much. This is kind of cool. In May 19th, 1881, Wallace is appointed the U.S. minister to the Ottoman Empire in Constantinople. He's made the ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, where he meets Sultan Abdulhamid II, and not just meets him, but by all accounts becomes a close personal friend of the Sultan, and for the next few years spends it in Constantinople / Istanbul, Turkey, as an international diplomat. Pretty good for a kid from Indiana. Here's an article in the Philadelphia Times, Thursday, June 26, 1884. It's titled, "The Hard-Hearted Diplomat. General Lew Wallace, United States Minister to Turkey, but better known as the mentor and master of the Sultan of Turkey, has just arrived in this country on a leave of absence." Well, why did he come back to the country? Instead of troubling his mind over the duties of his office or the heavy responsibilities incidental to his control of Abdulhamid, he raised his voice as soon as he reached the shore in a cry for pancakes, which articles of diet he announces are unknown in the dominions of the Sultan. Wants to get some good pancakes. Now, in summing up, in summation, the newspaper believes it'd be much better if he would just go back to Turkey because we need him over there, and they state, "So by one operation, the Sultan has robbed them of an advisor and the American people of their accustomed supply of Turkish news, all because of Wallace's desire to come home. The best thing he can do for the peace of mind of himself and all concerned is to eat his full of pancakes and hurry back to Turkey without delay." Well, so now he's a diplomat on top of all of that. He's been a governor and a diplomat. What else could he do? Well, how about if I told you that he would then go on to write the best-selling work of fiction in the 19th century in America. By 1899, his book was Ben-Hur, Tales of the Christ, would pass Uncle Tom's Cabin as the highest-selling book in America. He wrote Ben-Hur. Yes, the Ben-Hur that's been made into 3 major motion pictures. That has become part of American culture. The chariot race, the leprosy scenes. He's responsible for all of that, and that was done at the end of his career after he had accomplished so much in so many other fields. But it's not over. Writing the book and having it the best-selling book in America is not enough for Lew Wallace, because he's going to bring it to the stage. After 20 years of waiting, General Wallace has no regrets at staging Ben-Hur. To the editor of The World, and this is the New York World, after nearly 20 years of reluctance to have the scenes and incidents described in my book of Ben-Hur translated to the stage, it is with a spirit of considerable relief that I am able to make acknowledgement now that final acquiescence was not an error. Yes, I do not regret the hesitation, because I doubt if 10 years ago theatrical invention and ingenuity had reached a point where adequate production of Ben-Hur could have been made within the limitations of a stage covering an area of 40 by 70 feet. So, stage technology had come to the point where you could actually put the play on, because putting the play on, is going to mean chariot racing. Now, here we go from the debut on Broadway in November 30th, 1899. The World, New York, New York. Ben-Hur, a grand spectacular triumph. Scenes of Palestine and Rome charm audience. And here's the review. All who saw the transformation of General Lew Wallace's Ben-Hur into a play will look back upon last night as a memorable event in stage history. Not before in this season or last, perhaps not before in a decade, has New York had a theatrical production around which such keen and widespread interest centered. The feat was brilliantly accomplished. The great audience which wedged itself into the Broadway theater was transported back 2,000 years into realms of beauty and glory. And the big thing is the chariot race. The great spectacular event of the play, the chariot race, was next in order. Preliminary to it were the noisy contentions of the bettors outside the arena gates. Then a rumble was heard in the background, the hurrying clatter of flying horses' feet. It gradually grew louder, increasing almost to a roar. For an instant all was dark. Then came the light, and the race was on. Two chariots, which were drawn by 4 Arabian horses, formed the center of the picture. Despite the machinery, it was for the moment a real race. The animals with far-stretched necks and dilated nostrils ran like mad, urged on by the whips of the charioteers. The wheels of the cars rumbled and swayed. Now Hur was ahead, now Masala, then Hur again, and the race was won. Wilder enthusiasm than that which followed the scene has seldom manifested itself in a theater. There were curtain calls after curtain calls, followed by a pandemonium of cheers. It was beyond a success. It would play for 20 years on stage throughout America and into the 1920s. It'd be made into a major motion picture in 1915, again in 1959, the best one with Charlton Heston, obviously, and then just recently another production. But it's something which has become an indelible part of American culture, and that was Lew Wallace's final grand achievement. Now, in his later years, he built himself a wonderful estate in Indiana. You can go there now and tour it, the General Lew Wallace Study and Museum. It's in Crawfordsville. He liked to fish. This is great. He liked to fish. He built a beautiful mansion. Part of it with a library kind of looks like Monticello in Charlottesville. But he put a moat around his house and stocked it with fish so that he could fish while rocking on his back porch. That's something not many people do. But he did that, and that's how he played out his days, finally dying in 1905. Now let's go back through what we've got here. This is a man who was a clerk, a soldier, a lieutenant in the Mexican War, a publisher, a lawyer, a prosecutor, a state senator, a major general in the U.S. Army, a judge, a major general in the Mexican Army, territorial governor who pardoned Billy the Kid, a friend of Pat Garrett, a best-selling author and impresario. Oh, U.S. minister to the Ottoman Empire, forgot that one. He wrote Ben-Hur and saw it performed on Broadway. Now that's a life. Don't you think that's a life? That's any one of those occupations, pastimes, or accomplishments would have been enough for most of us. He strung them all together into that fulfilled life. Which brings us to our concluding act, which is, as usual, a cocktail. And believe it or not, there is a Ben-Hur cocktail, and the Ben-Hur cocktail is a variation of a vodka martini, which itself is a variation of a traditional gin martini. But this vodka martini is 3 parts vodka, 1 part Campari. So you're going to use Campari instead of the vermouth. That's going to impart a little bit of sweetness and a little bit of bitterness. It's actually a good combination. That's going to be served in a chilled martini glass, and it's going to have a maraschino cherry as the garnish. So have yourself a Ben-Hur and think of Lew Wallace while you do it, okay? Now, remember to like and subscribe. So we'll see you down the road at our next episode. All right, take care, everybody.